Welcome to the afternoon session. We are lucky to have with us two crypto OGs, Karl Floersch, co-founder of Optimism, Hayden Adams, founder of Uniswap. As has been reported on the internet, but never fully revealed until today, these guys have known each other for over a decade. They first met as Suitemates in college, and that has a lot to do with the genesis of both Uniswap and Optimism. And so we wanted to have them here today to talk about that journey and that experience and what they've learned along the way. And we'll talk for about 30 minutes and then open it up to you guys for questions. And one of the exciting things for me about this interview is I barely have to say anything. I can just turn it over to them and they will talk endlessly and tell great stories. But let's go, let's start off. So you guys were both at SUNY Binghamton.
Stony Brook University, the one and the only.
The only real SUNY. What the heck happened?
Hayden, I feel like you tell the story best.
Yeah, I think I initially met Karl through my roommate. They were friends from CS, and we ultimately ended up living in the same suite together. And Karl was just obsessed with this crypto thing. I wasn't that into it yet. But Karl would...
Sorry, what year was this?
This would be 2016, about
2015.
2015, and then leading into 2016, Karl was just obsessed with crypto. I didn't really know that much about it. He would talk about it kind of endlessly. It would be like, okay, Karl, sure, you know. But then he ultimately ends up getting a job at Consensus out of college, and I go and I was a mechanical engineering major, and I went and I worked at Siemens doing heat flow simulations, and I don't think I really liked my job very much, and I don't think so I ended up not being very good at it. I think you have to like what you do to be good at it. So I got laid off after 1 year working as an engineer, and I called Karl. I think it was maybe the first person I called, and because we were good friends at the time, and he was so happy and so excited. And he was like, congratulations, you can now work on Ethereum. It's the best thing ever. It's going to change the world. It's the future, decentralized, smart contracts, blah, blah. And he was just so passionate and so excited about it, and basically convinced me to, I was kind of like, oh, well, I don't really know how to code. I don't know if how do I get into that? And the thing that he told me is he said, it's so early on, and Ethereum is going to become this bigger thing. And there's this new way that you can build applications that people can trust with their money. And they don't have to trust each other. They don't have to trust a company, but they can coordinate using this blockchain thing. And he was like, if you spend the next year working on it, you'll probably be a world expert in 1 year, because there's so few people who know about it right now.
Yeah, I really think it is underappreciated just how you put a relatively feeling small amount of effort into something, and especially at the time, it was literally, it was a green field. And I actually do think that we're up there, a number of green fields that are coming up. But yeah, no, it was a crazy time.
And let's just go back a second. So how did you initially get red pilled on the whole?
Oh,
because this happened in college, right?
Oh yeah. I was building out peer-to-peer tech. Just for fun, because I was, anti-authoritarian or something weird. And then I found DevCon 0 videos of, Vitalik and Vlad talking about consensus protocols. And I was like, wait a second, you can actually build state machines in a distributed context. This is insane. And I ended up just kind of going down the rabbit hole. And I think that, I was in, Long Island, lived in New York City, grew up in New York City. And so, Consensus was close by. And so it was actually I was able to kind of go to the meetups and see all of these crazy people that I had seen on the internet talking about crazy stuff. And from then on, I was just, pilled working out of the Consensus office and trying to convince this guy to get into the space.
Well, one thing that's honestly really cool about Karl is that he did crypto pill himself on the internet. Like most people, Karl has evangelized it to so many people like me. I got into crypto because of Karl, but Karl himself just discovered it, and I don't think you had a friend. You didn't have a friend in the space that convinced you to get in, but you sort of just learned about it and really liked the ideas and adopted them. And so I think that's really cool.
That's why you got to listen to all the podcasts. That's what I do.
I listen to 0 podcasts.
And then pretty early on, right? You guys had either one or several like formative discussions with Vitalik about what needed to be built. Talk about how both Uniswap and Optimism emerged from that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So of course, I started out at Consensus, but I ended up working at the Ethereum Foundation, kind of like just studying under Vitalik. And there were definitely, two things that Vitalik was focused on, proof of stake and scalability. And so, of course, I was, building out these protocols, and we were chatting about layer 2 and all that kind of stuff. And that's like Optimism. But the other thing was, he was like, why is this not a thing? Why do we not have an X times Y equals K, very catchy term, market maker on Ethereum? This is like a no-brainer. And so, I was told that. I was like, okay, Hayden, he just got laid off. Let's get him in. Yeah,
they basically like tapped me. They were kind of, so for me, I spent the first like few months in crypto, basically just learning how to code Solidity on like YouTube. Even like Karl had written tutorials I was reading and trying to like write my own smart contracts. But I didn't have this like full CS background, so I felt like I was kind of wasn't learning very quickly, or like I felt like I was like stalling in my progress, and I wanted to learn more. So I talked to Karl about it and remember the fact, and he was like, well, you need a side project. That's the way you learn in coding. And so I was like, okay, I'll take a side project, and then we like brainstorming different ideas. I created a pink unicorn logo. That's the first thing I did. We didn't even know what the side project would be yet. And then there was this epic photo of Vitalik from the time wearing this purple shirt with a cat bag and this like amazing backdrop. And it was like inspired a lot of the vibe of branding that existed even before this project was. But anyway, then Karl was like, well, Vitalik has been talking about this idea of what's called an X times Y equals K market maker. No one has built it yet. You should just try building that. And I wasn't very interested in trading yet, or like, I don't know, it was like, I was kind of new to trading, but I just like figured Vitalik was pretty smart. And Karl had guided me pretty well so far. And so I was like, okay, I'll try to build it. And then Karl basically was like offered like almost like an incentive. He was like, I think he knew me. I needed a bit of and he basically said, if you can build an implementation of this with a working front end in 1 month, I'll shout you out at my talk at DevCon 2 on stage, and I'll shout out your project. And so I basically spent the next month, I basically learned, it was my first website as well. I did like the Create React app. I basically like created my first interface and my first real smart contract, which was this like very simple X times Y equals K market making contract, and had a demo ready within a month. It was a huge grind. And then Karl did, in fact, shout, he was, at the time you were talking about these ideas of like crypto economics, the idea of like, we can use blockchains to incentivize outcomes and coordination really without like, you can sort of just like create economic incentives that lead to like self-perpetuating systems. That was the idea at the time. And very early thinking, these ideas didn't really exist yet that much at the time, at least not formally. It was something now we take for granted as like part of what we call DeFi. And so, yeah.
Did the term DeFi even exist?
No, the term DeFi didn't exist for another like year and a half, probably. It didn't even exist at Uniswap's launch. It was about some time after that, I think. And then, and so I built this demo, and Karl shouted out on stage, and that actually led to like people reaching out and kind of a perpetuation of the project that ultimately led to where Uniswap is today.
We talked earlier today about navigating the path to product market fit. Like how long or what happened to give you signal that you'd built something that mattered and was working?
So I think for me, and then I think there's an interesting angle to talk about for Optimism as well and how it relates to Uniswap, which I'll let Karl tell that part. But for me, I think that like was pretty obsessive both on the front end and the smart contract side from the very beginning. Right, that first demo that I did, it was it was the website and the smart contracts. And, even though, I put a lot of effort into trying to like make it feel simpler and simpler. And one of the core ideas and benefits of doing, using an automated market maker at the time felt like that it was like very simple relative to these like Ether deltas of the world. And so, and the first person that ever started like really helping full time on Uniswap was Khalil, who's our head of design. And so the two of us, he's sort of like a designer who can code. And I was sort of, and so we basically like collaborated on making it both like, I think partially because there are so many complex concepts here at play, like the protocol seems complex, blockchains even, people are still wrapping their heads around what they mean and how they work. And so having that packaged up in something that felt simple and easy to use felt really important. And so we just put a huge amount of time, like endless iteration. And before most people knew about it, before we like launched it on mainnet, there was like a year to a year and a half of just like constant simplification and improvement on the front end side.
I think I was telling you this before, like that's one of my earliest memories of Uniswap, right? Everything else I'd used in crypto up to that point was like, an 18-step process to do a simple
Yeah.
thing. And you show up to the Uniswap website and you can like magically trade these tokens.
Yeah, and at launch, I don't think I even at like the mainnet launch, I don't think I knew if it was going to become a full-time thing for me. I thought it was like just like a side project that I like at that point felt like I should release.
Yeah, and Hayden was obsessive, of course, on the front end and the smart contracts. But there was a third thing. He was just obsessive as a person, just talking with everyone, including myself, incessantly about Uniswap. And I got a little taste of my own medicine after being very obsessed with Ethereum. I was very annoyed with Uniswap at least at some point. There was also a parallel, product kind of development track that happened for Optimism here, where we started out as plasma groups. So this was like, a layer 2 research group. Jing kind of got us together, and Kelvin, Ben, Jones, myself, we all worked on how to scale Ethereum. And there was one issue that we kept coming back to every single time, which is, can it run Uniswap? So we actually lived very close to Hayden and the kind of Uniswap folks. And so we were always, we would hang out and we'd kind of spitball various research directions. And of course, Hayden would be like, okay, so, how do I put Uniswap on this? And we were like, it's like it kind of works. You have to like rewrite everything, and it's like a horrible experience. And he was like, okay. He was very nice about it, but it was a terrible design, terrible product. And we just kept going over and over and over again back to see if it can run Uniswap. And we eventually arrived at this kind of optimistic roll-up design, which finally could support the kind of same security guarantees and decentralization guarantees, or at least close to the same as, Uniswap on L1. And so that's when we were like, okay, let's ship it. This is finally the design, started Optimism proper, of course, within the name, and also released Unipig, which was the first, optimistic roll-up POC alongside Uniswap. So that was a whole like very entangled development process with the protocol and the app layer kind of jammed together.
So is it fair to say that sort of like support for Uniswap was the North Star that like ultimately drove you to your name, your architecture, your company?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I think that like there were properties of Uniswap that made it like hard. Like when people were brainstorming, like there's all these different iterations of Plasma. There was Plasma Cash, Plasma Prime, Plasma. There's all these different like Plasma variants, which are like the precursors to rollups. And they all had like these like trade-offs that were really challenging, but they worked for very simple applications, and then the more complex the application got. Uniswap is simple in a sense, but it's complex in the sense that there's like many different users being coordinated in a smart contract. So like for payments, like you could use state channels or plasmas and it worked totally fine. But when you started to try to coordinate like pooled liquidity provision across multiple providers that needed to backtrack, like things like Plasma had all these like mass exit games that were scary, and all those problems that were like holding back the Plasma designs were like they all just like conflicted with Uniswap, which is sort of like trying to embody like Ethereum, sort of like the idea of like DeFi and people coordinating within smart contracts. It was just like most affected by some of these Plasma trade-offs. But it ultimately did like iterate towards this design that finally worked. That was at that Scaling Ethereum conference was, I think, when we first really talked about that.
Oh yeah.
Good conference in Canada, I think.
It's amazing and humbling to think about like where you guys came from and where you are now. Talk about, you both have like pretty big grandiose visions for what the future looks like. Maybe, I've heard you talk about this before. What do you think the future, you obviously there's Uniswap v4, which you can talk about liquidity pools, but like talk about how you see this all coming together.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing I think a lot about in terms of like what we're trying to achieve in the world, the internet really democratized access to information. So most information is like digitized, put on the internet, and is accessible globally, instantly. It's in one click basically. And that's a really powerful concept. And then when you compare that and contrast that against, the world of like ownership and assets, right? The internet just works, right? You have all this like seamless flow of information, right? I can like take a photo of you, I could post it on Twitter, someone else could download it, post it to Reddit, email it, right? It all just flows together and it's all accessible. And when you compare that against the world of like ownership and assets and finance, right? Whether it's stocks or whether it's like Starbucks rewards points or airline miles or video game items or whatever it is, like all value like lives in these like very siloed different systems. And for me, a lot of what blockchains are trying to do is really just like standardize how value is represented in a way that basically the same way that the internet made information more, democratized, is trying to make like ownership and value and wealth creation more democratized. And so that's what like DeFi is about. And the role that we play within that world is, as Uniswap, is allowing people to convert between different forms of value. So the same way that like there's like way more information on the internet than ever existed in any like library or whatever. There's gonna be so much value and like assets represented within blockchains. And our mission is to like make it so that you could it's to have like a universal way of exchanging and converting between these different forms of value, whatever they are. I think one of the reasons that sometimes people like think about trading and they think like casino or gambling or something like that, but I actually think that like people underrate how important trading is to society. Right? Trading is how you like convert between things that you value. And if any cost put on top of that like is like a extra like some value is almost like in this like exists in this potential state that can never even be realized because in converting it's kind of like energy. When you convert between forms of energy is lost, and that's the same thing with trading. Between forms of value, there's like waste and loss, and by like making low cost, efficient conversion of value, we think that we can like ultimately create a more prosperous and abundant world.
You guys have obviously made a ton of progress making that statement true, like in the world of ERC20 tokens. Like, what do you think? What's the next concrete step that you want to take to make?
Okay. I can try to bring this back to like a closer to like concrete place, which is basically that like right now when you use products within the blockchain world, they feel like this like entire separate thing that you're not used to and it's kind of uncomfortable. But when you think about like what things like Optimism really are like paralleled to in like outside of crypto, it's kind of like almost like it's like when you send an email, you have to like view and track your AWS credits. It's like that's what gas is, right? It's kind of like crazy. And when people like are managing, people don't want to have like entirely new ways of managing their security and access. And so I think it's partially is about like taking the real underlying benefits, right? The 24/7 transparency, the sort of improved trust and redundancy and all that you get with blockchains. So these fundamental properties. It's about keeping those, but then creating real products that users use that have really, don't feel like a completely different, more hard thing to use. And and so it's just about like abstracting away the complexities of crypto and building applications on top of it. And continuing, I think that like the scaling that is continuing to scale it up so it continues to get cheaper and faster.
Cool. And good segue to what you spend your days and nights thinking about.
Great segue. Yeah, just as Hayden wants to abstract away the complexity of crypto at the app layer, my focus 24/7 is the superchain, which a lot of that is about abstracting away the complexities of different chains at the developer layer. Like we currently exist in this world of massive, massive fragmentation between all of these different chains, different developer stacks, different versions. It is an absolute nightmare. And so, what we're working on is, okay, what are the fundamental primitives developers need in order to deploy their applications and also scale their applications beyond what any single chain can provide. And so that means, getting everyone to a shared interoperability standard and making sure that the developer tools are ready for this, because I do think that we're kind of, at a paradigm shift moment where we've been working in this like single chain context for a really long time. And now we're like plastering over a bunch of, different chains, but we are moving into a new kind of world where chains are no longer just these like clunky things, but instead they are primitives that you then manipulate and work with and have access to as a developer, as a chain governor within the superchain. And so like this is that kind of paradigm shift means that we have a huge amount of kind of rewriting, re-architecting, and retooling that we can do that will massively speed up developer productivity. And I do think it is legitimately similar to, like mainframe era to the, commodity hardware era. Like we're moving from that in the kind of virtual sense from mainframes to, horizontal scalability.
I think one of the best mental models for me, a lot of what I've done over the years is just talk with Karl and try to figure out how to put his ideas into words that make sense for me. I don't mean that as an insult. I think it's just like an interesting part of the process here. For me, the easiest mental model right now for blockchains is basically just like servers with superpowers, where it's like, okay, like, just like a server, provides compute and you can run applications on it. What is different from normal servers? It's like various things. Like, let's say you have an application where you don't want, an operator to steal the money, right? SPF or whatever. Like, let's say, if you want a version of FTX where SPF can't steal the money, right? Then you might want to use one of these fancy blockchain servers because you can use things like, open source verified smart contracts on top of them to guarantee that like funds are where they say they are. Or if you like have an application where you think it's going to become so critical to the global economy that it can never go down and you can never have access restricted to it, then you might want to use one of these fancy blockchain servers. But like that's like a really simplified mental model that I think for me has helped a lot. It also helps a lot when you think about like scaling trajectories and that's kind of why they sort of like when you think about like if you think about like well, it's like how do you scale servers? Well, you have like beefier servers and then you have many of them. And like how do you scale blockchains? You have like you can have either beefier blockchains or you can have many of them. And like, part of when people talk about like things like interop, it's just like how can there's something like today or like so far we've been running everything on like on Ethereum, everything's been running on this one Ethereum server. And because everything's running on the same server, it's very easy to have application logic shared. And then part of what interop is trying to figure out is just like how can we recreate that in a world where we have more servers. And it's like that to me is the easiest mental model that gets you pretty far in blockchain scaling.
And so if you think out, I don't know, call it 2 to 5 years, like what do you think are the main things that look different, both about Uniswap and Optimism and just like how people are using blockchains and how the role that crypto plays in people's lives?
Great.
Either it could be things that you wish will happen or that you think or both.
Okay, I mean, I'll talk about it on the infrastructure layer. I think we will have thousands of chains. I think that individual ecosystems,
like thousands of application-specific rollups, or
I would say like ecosystem. I mean, a combination, of course, application specific, but also I think each ecosystem might even have many chains that are all working together, and then you can still bridge between all of them, and they're all interoperable. We've scaled up Ethereum DA very significantly. We have, stage 2 decentralization with multi-proofs.
Yeah, for me, I hope that we've really abstracted away gas. So, especially at the user layer, I hope, but sometimes fixing it at the user layer also requires like protocol level innovation. But generally, I hope that we have solved like 5 or 6 problems. One is like gas should be fully abstracted. 2, latency should be like sub half a second for every transaction. Onboarding, I should be able to tell, if like today, if someone's grandparent or something wanted to onboard to crypto, I would tell them to use Coinbase, and I would want to be able to tell them to use a more like crypto native or like a more self custody type of thing. Like I would want them to be able to tell them to use like download the Uniswap app or whatever, and have like the kind of like some of the account abstraction stuff that everyone's been working on play out to a point where we can onboard people directly into some of this like self custody or semi self custody, but like directly. My hope is that every transaction would be sub 1 cent in cost. So yeah, just like a few like key like user properties: speed, cost, user experience. I just want my hope. How many years did you say? 2 years?
2.
Yeah,
pick your
fingers crossed. But and then also there's just like these product level like abstractions, right? Like in the Uniswap products, you should be able to convert any asset to any other asset. You shouldn't have to think about like the chains, and you shouldn't have to think about it. Like we should have fully abstracted those. And my hope is within 2 years we get there.
Yeah. Sub-cent, sub-second.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, we need to fix the infrastructure so that we can have a creative space to build real applications that people love to use and like otherwise can't use. Like I feel like every time it's so sad looking at the crypto space. I'm not gonna lie, the application space has not really changed since basically 2016. Like since Uniswap was created, it's so sad like looking at it. Like even applications that I used to like kind of have been deprecated, and it's really a sad place. But But there's hope at the end. There's opportunity. With every problem comes opportunity, because I really do think that we have been limited in the creativity and the composability based on, what we can actually do. And so we're really getting there.
Yeah, I do agree. I think a lot of like end user applications have been really held up by like waiting for progress on infrastructure layer things. But I think that that's why one reason I'm kind of excited. We've started to build more and more full stack at Uniswap, which I really like. I think that like people underrate. I think a lot of the time in crypto, people like pick a very narrow like horizontal sliver of the tech stack and say like, this is where we build, right? When you think when you use and that's where things like the server mental model helps. Like when you think about like blockchains as servers, you think like, oh, like, well, we were building a server, and then it's like, well, what's on top of the server? And then like, and so like, I think that like, I'm excited for more people to kind of build further across the stack where they're like building their own front ends and their own back ends, and they're building their back ends to serve their front ends, which is like an end user application that needs these fancy properties of these blockchain servers. So I think we'll get there, and I think that there's like going to be momentum there, but I do, and so I agree. Like, it's hard to know if it's just been held back by infrastructure or if it's been like. I think a lot of it is also that a lot of funding has gone to infrastructure. Maybe that's a, fund apps, please. No, I'm joking. I know you guys do.
We're always looking for great apps.
I think that like app level. I think that's really like what is going to progress the space forward is people building compelling user-facing products that rely on crypto for some of its properties. But still are like compelling in their own right? Not just because they're like, not like it's a crypto game, so it's like, it should be a game that uses crypto because it needs it or something, things like that.
If you guys could rewind your mental clocks and think about when you were at the place at Uniswap and Optimism where the CSX cohort is, what is like one piece of advice that you would give your prior selves that you've learned the hard way?
I mean, I'll say it is some very basic stuff, but I spent a long time, too long, being entirely nomadic and not having a home and not having basic needs covered. And I will say, like, not just from a like quality of life perspective, but just straight up a productivity perspective, it was an insane thing. I had to like, lean on Hayden. Hayden was like, get an apartment, fix your stuff, because otherwise you burn out, and it's crazy. And like, we can do some insane stuff if we have the right foundation. So that I definitely underappreciated. It's worth the investment.
I remember begging Karl to just rent an apartment for like 2 years as he like traveled the world constantly. For me, honestly, also some of it is very basic stuff. Like, I think that like, I've had to go through a lot of different forms of personal growth through the Uniswap journey. It really like, each stage brings in like a lot of new pressures and learnings. And I think something that I underappreciated is like learning about myself. Like, I think I like learned how to like do new things that I had never done before. And I was always like very focused on that. I did put a lot into learning and growth there. But I think where I like underappreciated is like better internalization and understanding of how I think and what my own preferences are, my own needs and wants are. And that for me has been what I've been like pretty focused on for the past like half a year maybe in growing. It's paid off a lot. And I'm like, well, maybe I should have done some of this earlier.
So your own preferences in terms of company, product, org, or just like what makes
like
you
lifestyle. I hate mornings, and I tried fighting that for so long and like force myself to wake up and do early morning meetings. And I just hate mornings. I still hate them. And like, I'm happier and more productive if I get to sleep in sometimes and I just do my meetings a little bit later in the day. And I still work really hard and get a lot done, but like forcing like things like that, where it's just like, why am I fighting my own natural like desires so hard here? Just like very basic stuff like that. There's like more like maybe like other things around like, my own preferences for like autonomy versus like how that relates to running a company. And there's all these like, there's so many things you have to go every stage of, we're 120 people now. And so I felt like my job has completely changed every 6 months, probably for the past 7 years.
Oh yeah.
And like, every time I have to learn completely new things. But I think that what I'm hoping to bring this time is like a better understanding of what I value in my own life, so that I can like, as I grow and change my role and whatever, like I can factor that in, so I'm not suddenly like putting pressures on my own like personal kind of happiness, because that's what motivates me and like what actually makes me do my best work.
Yeah, enables you to play the long game, which is like super important.
And it is a long game, like, to do anything, right? I've been working on Uniswap for 7 years. I've been working on Optimism to some degree for probably even longer if you count the precursors.
Totally. Yeah. And I will say on the 6-month, your role changes. That is 100% right. And I will say the thing that I have learned recently more than anything else is that I need to be actively seeking out knowledge, advice, etc. Shout out to Jason, who has given me a lot of this. Seriously, I feel like I went through a period of time learning about Ethereum where I was just hungry for knowledge and like studying up on my next move in the space. And then there was a kind of lull where it felt like there wasn't that much to learn, but I realized that I just wasn't actively seeking out that advice and that knowledge. And, you know, my role changed. I went from CTO to CEO recently. And that was an experience where I was like humbled by the amount of information and advice that I needed to get. And so, you know, it is out there if you're like actually looking to grow and like, you know, stay humble and try to improve yourself, because we all need it. I mean, I need it. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, incredible. Thank you, guys. Wanted to open it up to you guys. And, you know, these guys are amazing about being open books. So feel free to make your questions provocative, specific, whatever you'd like to ask.
Hey guys, my name is Vishwa. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Anera Labs. We're actually intimately involved with an ERC standard that you guys, I think, have both supported. I think Across and Uniswap proposed ERC 7683.
Yep.
We're actually the only cross-chain solver that you can find an email ID and a website for today. So yeah, just wanted to say, make myself known, and that's the domain that we're interested in. You know, there's two aspects of that which I think overlap for different reasons on both sides. One is obviously on the liquidity side, and I think that's where it's intimately more important to Hayden. Uniswap V4 is coming out. There's a bunch of interesting hooks that are making their way in, and I wanted to ask you, at what point does someone who's making a trade on Robinhood have their trade routed through a Uniswap V4 hook, and like what are the things that need to happen for that reality to realize? And then on the optimism side of that is within ERC 7683, there's this like massive foot race of who gets to fill the order. And we play some of those games so that we can try to fill user orders and we can make money doing that. Arbitrum recently announced Time Boost, and so they're creating this sort of like secondary market for, you know, the contested state within Arbitrum. How does that make you think about like MEV markets for Optimism mainnet, but also more broadly for the superchain? Thank you. It was a very long rant.
Great questions. Yeah, EIP is 7603, right? Yeah, it's good. Love that EIP. It actually kind of came out of our work on Uniswap X and the cross-chain Uniswap X white paper, and then we realized that if it was Uniswap branded, it might not, like we really wanted it to be like an industry-wide standard. We felt like that was the best version of it. So we decided to abstract it into an EIP to like kind of encourage other people to adopt it as well. Versus if you were like, everyone should use cross-chain Uniswap X, people might be like, oh, okay, that's a Uniswap thing only. In terms of how to get it integrated into Robinhood, I think that like, you know, I think we'll get there. I think that like we're, you know, excited to be building out a lot of infra on top of this standard. And really integrate it within our own products, so that to get to when I was talking about like chain abstraction, right? We want to get to that experience where you can swap any token on any chain to any other token on any other chain. And this standard is essentially how we're proposing that we do it. Probably before Robinhood, we should get it in the Uniswap web app. And that's probably like the next step for it, is to like launch it, start bootstrapping liquidity and fillers, you know, like what you're talking about. But I think that if it is successful, I think that it will become like the obvious way to do cross-chain trading. And then I think that like pretty much every interface to crypto trading, or particularly like, for example, like Robinhood Wallet or something, you know, should adopt it for cross-chain trading. I think there's an interesting question sometimes about like if teams like Robinhood want to integrate through like the protocol directly, or if they'd rather integrate through like an API abstraction layer. I think it's possible that some of them would rather do that, or even they could do it through like market making abstraction layers, where market makers that tap into it are like the abstraction for them. So I don't know I don't know the exact answer there, but I think that like it's kind of like a, you know, crawl, walk, run of it, which is like, let's just get it up and running, have people start to use it within like the current context of how people are trading crypto. And then from there, we start getting it integrated everywhere. Pass it to Karl.
Pass it off. Well, okay, on the, MEV and the superchain topic, I mean, I think that the ultimate thing is subcent, subsecond transactions, and you'll notice that neither one of those things have anything to do really with MEV. And the reality is that we just need to push down prices, push down latency, and make a good user experience. And in order for that to happen, we need a good developer experience. And for that to happen, we need good primitives and great infrastructure. Please use the superchain. No, but anyway, really though, I think it's important that we don't like over-engineer these things. I think, huge shout out to Dan Robinson with like priority is all you need, if you've seen that. I also think priority is all you need specifically because that's exactly how we currently do our transaction ordering. It's based on priority fee. It's like the, keep it simple. And I think that there's a lesson there because if you choose a simple design and then you just improve on it, then the longer it's around, people come up with crazy uses of that design that allows you to create all this expressivity. But if you, if you just keep it simple and stick to it and then try to make the product better every, month, every day, I think we'll end in a good spot. And we don't need to like create research papers to, get mass adoption. We do need to create research papers. It's just different phase, different part of the design process.
Yeah, and by the way, keep it simple is like a really like the most underrated thing in almost any part of anything that anyone does. Like, but it actually is also how we created that standard. It was like, what if we need cross-chain trading? What if we just hand-waved everything? And that's how we evolved at that EIP. It's like, what if we just hand-wave all bridging and we assume that we have it figured out and abstracted away in this concept of what we call like a settlement oracle? Like whatever, we'll figure that out later. And then that was like what literally created the standard is like, what if we just abstract away and keep it insanely simple? And ultimately, I think it's like, I think it's a really promising standard. So.
Hi, this is Bill from Ping AI. And good to see you again. So at Ping AI, we're basically building an open and Web3 alternative to Apple Intelligence. Basically, like your Siri, you can talk to it and ask it, hey, can you give me some nice restaurant recommendation, or can you like help me buy some nice yoga pants? And essentially, that's an intent similar to a DeFi intent that you can like go into and do MEV. Here, it's like a more like an advertisement like intent that you can go and throw it to all the qualified service provider that we imagine in the future will all be AI agent with wallets to come and bid for that intent. And to do this, the settlement can be slow, but the bidding and the deciding of who will be the service provider needs to be sub-second, just like how Google ads auction systems work. I was wondering how do you guys see the future of the current kind of infrastructure going to support this even much larger, more scalable micropayment stuff? That's one question. Second question is about superchain. We're also doing some research on potentially be part of the superchain ecosystem and develop one of the Ethereum layer 2, since one of our co-founder David is also from Ethereum Foundation doing research on all the MEV stuff and layer 2, and we have very strong developers that worked on Base and all those other protocols. So wondering for what our use case want to build, do you see the Optimism superchain is the right fit, or we need to build something that is even more like a state channel style solution on top of superchain? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. This may be a hand wave answer, but generally speaking, the way you the needs actually predicate that the tech, maybe the question is how fast will we get there? Because absolutely we need fast. People aren't gonna use worse products, and so if you want the products and things built on crypto to be adopted and used, you have to make them as fast as people want them to be and as fast as products that don't use crypto. So the answer is maybe you're saying how ready is the infrastructure? How it's getting close. It's sometimes the speculation in crypto evolves faster than the infrastructure in tech. You have this steady drumbeat of tech progress, and then you have this hype cycles of narrative, and the cool thing is that it's still a converging high, and so I don't know where we are. It's hard to predict exact adoption timelines, because it's really funny, because if you talked to me 7 years ago and you told me where Uniswap would be today, I would never believe you. It would be there's no chance that DeFi is that big and Uniswap is that big. But then if you went to me 3 years ago they'd be like, I would have like underpaced what I expected. You know, so like it's kind of like very hard to know how fast these things will progress and be adopted. But the steady drumbeat of tech progress from teams like Optimism, you know, and scale, you know, the steady drumbeat of scaling and even like focus and understanding that like things like latency are incredibly important, maybe one of the most important properties, is like continuing. But then we'll pass it off to Karl for Superchain to tell you how you should use a different tech stack.
You should use the superchain. No, sub-second seems to fit your needs. No, but in terms of what we have right exactly now, it depends on the timelines, et cetera. However, will we get there eventually? Absolutely. Do we have line of sight to get there eventually? Absolutely. Like that's going to be a thing. The only thing that I will say, given the fact that we, you know, realistically, if you're talking about mega scale, just like literally, it's not there yet. If you build using the right abstractions, then the application logic can be portable for, you know, a kind of suboptimal solution that's maybe more centralized, maybe less ideal, and then ports over to the more decentralized future once the infrastructure is ready. I think a huge amount of the like crypto evolution has been establishing what those abstraction layers are and figuring out, okay, how can we all work on things in parallel and ideally not block application layer logic with infrastructure issues. And, you know, we're seeing this pay off. I'll just randomly show a fact. We finally have a ZK proof, validity proof for OP Sepolia, our testnet. And that was because, you know, we built with this abstraction where we were like, okay, we know that ZK proofs can plug in eventually, and we'll make the bet that they will, and now they are. And so like the infrastructure, as long as we're, you know, kind of working in on our little things and we negotiate those APIs, I'm pretty bullish that you'll be able to make fast progress and be supported in the future when we have decentralization nirvana.
I want to ask, what are the most significant obstacles, in your opinion, to getting to this future where there's thousands of chains? Is it, for example, the kind of liquidity requirements that are difficult? Maybe the deal-making process?
Yes. Okay. So I'll say two things. One, the first one is definitely the proof system. We currently have proofs which prove a single chain. We need proofs that essentially prove all of these different chains and allow them to interoperate at low latency. And then that brings me to the second thing, which is the low latency bit, which is we need to make sure that all of the messages pass through the network in a realistic way that doesn't compromise on decentralization and security, et cetera. So these are like the major infrastructure challenges. I will also just say there is a huge number of developer challenges as well that come around once you have those primitives and APIs, which is, okay, we are now existing within a more asynchronous environment. So things like building your application in a way that, you know, does account for asynchrony, or building out developer tools that abstract away the asynchrony and allow other people to not have to worry about it. Those things are going to be a kind of greenfield that we're just starting to explore. Like, chains are not types yet. They're not like developer primitives yet. And we are getting to a point where they will become developer primitives once the, you know, interoperability standards have stabilized. And that'll be a challenge in and of itself.
Sometimes I just feel like people just have to do it. I don't know. It's like, like a lot of the tools are there and you can build things. I think that there's like a lot of reason. I think that like when it comes to like mainstream adoption, it honestly feels like the biggest thing that holds back like big companies from adopting crypto is literally just regulatory stuff and like weird. I hate to bring it to regulatory because I'm like, so it doesn't like, I'm just like, I'm such a believer that like in the long term, like crypto is here and is here to stay. And it's like sort of like an inevitable like continuation of like progress in humanity's progress. At the same time, there's like these like local thing. When you talk about like local, like, you know, issues and like short-term things that like hold it back, I think that like we would have an explosion of use cases if there wasn't a bit of like a regulatory chilling that has happened in the US, to be honest, and outside the US as well, where I think that like it's such a powerful technology and it's so impactful that it's like scary to people that are, you know, afraid of change, and rightfully so. And I get it, but like at the same time, there's like so much you can do with it, and there's so many people that could use it. But then I think there's also a bit of a branding problem sometimes, which is like,
oh yeah.
So that's the sort of one side. The other, I think from within the industry, I think that there's like a lot of sort of short-term thinking and a lot of like kind of like our space has often had not as good actors in it as well, and I think that's like really hurt. So there's two things that's holding back. Some people are afraid to build because of regulatory stuff. Some people are afraid or don't want to build because of like a reputational branding damage that has been done in part by like issues from within crypto, which is very normal. Like if you think about like email, like most emails are probably scam emails, but email isn't a scam technology, and so I think that we just need like better understanding of what this stuff is. And a kind of a little bit of almost like a repositioning of our industry within the world, to be honest, which is a weird challenge. I know these are like aren't tech. That maybe part of what I'm trying to say is like I don't think our biggest challenges are technical. I think they're like, honestly, like a combination of like people just needing to build things that work, and it's kind of like sometimes you need someone to like carve the way and like prove something out that other people have. Like as an example, like I think that in the long run. Crypto vampire attacks will become like such a part of the real world. Like someone will take down a Web2 like giant with a crypto token. So that's like an inevitability. Like there's going to be some project where like a crypto company will come in with a token and like create a direct relationship to users that like dethrones like a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And whenever that happens, that like unleashes like a floodgate of like other people being like, oh, we can create direct because. And I don't mean that as like it's not about like short-term incentives. It's about like. Like building a direct relationship between product and platform and users in a way that hasn't really been done before. But doing it in like a non-scammy, real way, it's just like so powerful. So anyway, it's like, but like once one person does it, like other people will learn how to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of something that seems contrarian today, but to your point, as soon as the first person does it, everybody's going to.
In my mind, it's like a complete inevitability.
Hi, my name is Matthew. I'm the co-founder of Open Gradient. We're building decentralized infrastructure for seamless ANML model hosting as well as secure inference. So the goal is to be able to train a model on your computer, drag and drop, upload it to our decentralized file store, and be able to immediately inference it within a smart contract on any chain within seconds. Firstly, thank you so much for being here. Actually, Open Gradient stemmed from we started building it at Super Hacks, which is Optimism's hackathon last year. And won the best OP Stack fork. And then shortly after that, we actually got a grant from Uniswap to do research on forward-looking volatility forecasting and using that to scale fees dynamically for Uniswap v4. So yeah, super excited to see you guys here. My question is, what do you think, in each of your respective products has been kind of the biggest major factors that has helped, your project weather multiple cycles and, maintain its dominance on the market, given the fact that, like Hayden mentioned, vampire attacks are very common, sometimes liquidity could be mercenary. A lot of like people just want to farm the newest token for the newest protocol that's up and coming. And yeah, we'd love to learn more about your experiences with that.
I think that it is easy to vampire attack at a surface level. However, consistent effort in a genuine direction is very hard to fake. And therefore, people would rather just work together to try to realize the vision versus, go off on a separate direction. And if they do go off on a separate direction, sometimes they'll come back and join. And, hopefully we can get to a point where we are moving in that productive direction. I think that Hayden's kind of vampire attack story was really about disintermediating existing intermediaries. But the whole point of what we're building is the platform for disintermediation. And so if you want to help contribute to building that platform, join us, because there's only one platform of disintermediation. There's only one world computer, because there's only one world.
World Computer is actually another scaling company. No, okay. But you see, you wanted to, never mind. Okay, so I think for me, it's actually not about like a specific feature. It's more about like a mindset and a continuation of progress. Like for me, like it's about like the death of a product is actually stagnation, not like anything else. And so like for us, like the reason I think that we've been able to to keep our position and continue to grow is that we've constantly maintained and tried to improve on what we built. right? We didn't stop at Uniswap v1, we built Uniswap v2, which kind of, it's interesting because these are like non-upgradable smart contracts. Each version is almost competing with the previous. And then like after v2, we built v3 and it kind of like killed v2. And now we're building v4 because, we're never quite satisfied with the current state. We always want to think about how do we be better, right? That's even like Uniswap X and these other things are also in some ways like competing with their own products. If you think about them purely as protocol, or if you think about them as like protocols, but when you think about like what we're trying to achieve like, and the mission we're trying to achieve, we're trying to make things like, better, cheaper, faster, simpler. So it's just like a constant focus on being better at what we do and then not losing sight of that. Right? It's very easy to get distracted in crypto and try to go do other things. Or like, we did this thing, let's do this other synergistic thing. Versus like, in some ways, we're doing a lot of things at once, right? We have our wallet, we have our web app, but when you actually look at it all, it's all serving this like ultimate need of like, how do we make swapping like really simple and easy and cheap? And so I think it's just about focus.
Yeah. Oh, and it is very easy to be afraid. And like being open source, being like, doing this thing, it's very easy to be afraid and like close yourself off and close down your repo and like do these kinds of stuff. And you have to see the long game. And even if people say, hey, you're going to pass up on this opportunity, like this is going to destroy your company, blah, 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 blah. You really have to like stay true to the principles and not get distracted for A, focus reasons, but B, that is what makes the thing successful in the long term, at least I think.
Yeah, there's a good saying actually that like inspiration is temporary, but discipline and consistency lead to long-term results. And you guys have both been like incredibly disciplined and consistent in moving forward what you're building over a very long period of time.
Well, consistent and disciplined in some respects.
In some
Jason knows. Not in every
In
respect.
some respects.
My name is Manashri. I am the founder of Firma. We are a universal proof generation layer, and we generate proofs for any proof system in a cheap, performant, and reliable manner. Yay! Back in the day, I was working on the Mina protocol. I was part of Owen Labs and worked very hard on the proof system. So very thankful that you accepted our proposal. I remember the day when we learned about the news. So I have a question to you, Karl. What do you think are the pain points of a project that is as big as yours, even, in embracing ZK? Let's say you've already chosen your proof system. What are the pain points of still embracing ZK?
Yeah, there is only one pain point. You could say there are two, but there is only one, and that is it is very expensive. If it was cheap, okay, I'll give more than that. But if it was cheap, that would be immediate, enormous value add. We'd just be ZK proving everything, no questions asked. I feel very confident about that. There are some other things that are going to be longer term, but first let's solve the cost, and that is security. We probably are going to need time for these things to harden, multi-proofs, etc. So yes, we will need that. And then there's also latency. We can get around some of the latency issues in the near term. So I'm not super concerned. But man, if we get to cheap proofs, that would be insane. It would change the game. But we'll be ready.
I think that was directed at Karl. I don't know if I have too much to add. I think for me, maybe the only thing I'll throw out on ZK is I get a little sussed out sometimes because it's such new, novel cryptography. Like, I'm not an expert level cryptographer. And I do think it's probably like less, like most things in crypto tend to be less complex than people think they are, especially the things that sound complex. But at the same time, just because it's like a much more novel, new area of cryptography relative to like things like hashing and like whatever, which are so well understood. To me, I get like a little spooked out. Like if an implementation is broken, will people even discover or figure that out in the first place? So for me, it just feels like it's like a hardening over time thing. Like it literally just needs to cook, I think, a bit from my perspective. But I also am very excited about the ZK world, and I'm also a believer in ZK proving pretty much everything.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Really appreciate the conversation.